All right, man, you're one of these guys that does not drink alcohol. I'm the same way. And I've done content on my channel talking about this is what happens to your body if you cut out alcohol. This is what happens to your brain if you cut out alcohol. You know, coming from experience as someone that's cut out alcohol, what are 5 things that you noticed happened to you, brain, body, spirituality, whatever, when you cut out alcohol?
First thing that I noticed was I had more consistent sleep. Shock, horror. If you're drinking, it's usually not in the middle of the day. It's probably until midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning. I was a club promoter by trade for a long time. So my bread and butter was in the trenches, running nightclubs and getting drunk as well. It's one of the perks, I suppose, of the job. So I had more consistency with my sleep. And that downstream from it made a huge difference to my psychological health, to my training, to everything that I wanted to do. That consistency allowed me to build habits that I'd failed at building for 5 years before.
I popped a link down below for House of Macadamia if you want to try them out too. They are where I get my macadamia nuts these days. They're all grown in South Africa. When you buy from them, you're directly supporting the farmers as well. So the farmers really do take a hit in South Africa. So by going through House of Macadamia, a lot of it goes back to working through the farmers and help support those farmers. But everything is harvested and packaged less than an hour from each other. They harvest them and then they drive them less than an hour away, package them, everything is super fresh, not going rancid, which macadamia nuts don't really go that rancid anyway. But the point is, they have macadamia nut oil, macadamia nut bars, straight up macadamia nuts with all kinds of different flavors, so really easy to add to your diet. I recommend them if you're gonna get it. You're gonna spend a fortune at the grocery store. Macadamia nuts are not the cheapest nut, but using that discount, you can save a few bucks on getting some good macadamia nuts from House of Macadamia. Plus, with any purchase using that link, a free 20-ounce bottle of cold-pressed macadamia nut oil. Literally the only cold-pressed macadamia nut oil that I know of that's on the market. And you're getting one completely free if you just use that link down below. There's no catches, it's just to get the word out there.
So the first time that I ever went sober, I did 6 months. And in that time, I built my meditation habit, I built my reading habit, and I built my breathwork habit first thing in the morning. Those are still habits today that I use. Right. And that was just a 6-month period. The same way as one really good cut and a good recomp back up in terms of like redieting and building those calories back in could basically be all you needed. If you did it right, you could get lean once and then hold on to that leanness basically for the rest of time. That was kind of how I saw it. So consistency of sleep, first thing. Second thing, it forced me to develop real social confidence, which was very surprising. I didn't realize how much I was leaning on alcohol as a buttress for my social anxiety, for my confidence to go up and speak to girls in a bar. Apparently I needed it. And you have 2 choices when you cut out alcohol. You can either stand in the corner on your own and not talk to the girl or not really interact with the group that you're with, or you can pluck up the like endogenous courage to be able to go and do it without the assistance of alcohol and go and get stuck in. Both of those things together were really, really profound. The third one that I saw that was kind of surprising, after around about 6 weeks or so of going sober, and remember, I wasn't a heavy drinker, right? Like I would binge every fortnight to every 3 weeks or so. So it was a heavy club promoter style drink night out, but it wasn't that consistent, certainly not for the UK. And I'm in my 20s. I'm made of rubber and magic, right? Like there's nothing's
Sure.
going to happen to me. Third one that I went through that I thought was like very surprising after about 6 weeks or so was the improvement in my mental agility. So I have no idea whether this was downstream from good quality sleep, downstream from better eating habits because I wasn't staying up late, which meant that I wasn't eating dog the next day, or whether there was something special about not having had alcohol in my system, right? So I don't know whether it was a proximate or a byproduct effect of what was going on, but my thoughts just ended up being sharper. I had more like nimbleness with my thoughts. I was more precise with the way that I was speaking. And again, this was on top of the meditation being facilitated and the breath work and the journaling and everything was working together. So it really supercharged my personal development. Socially, one thing that it really forced me to do was to look at the sort of events I was attending and the sort of people I was attending them with. So I guess that my number 4 is something that's a consideration that might be a danger to some people, which is a lot of the events that you're attending, you couldn't bear to attend if you were sober. And the only reason that you can is because you're drinking. And a lot of the people that you're going with, you can only bear to be around because you're drinking. And they only want you to be around them because you're drinking as well. And this is a really uncomfortable realization. And thankfully, I didn't lose many friends from this. Like I was pretty sort of selective with who I was hanging about with in any case. But that definitely did happen. It made me think, why am I going to this party, this particular event, which I've been to 20 times before, and I never really enjoy, but because I get drunk, I kind of forget that it until the next time before I go, that I then get drunk to forget that it again. And that was a really, really interesting takeaway. And then the final one, which we spoke about in our conversation on caffeine as well, which is it gave me this sense of sovereignty over myself, which was, I think, the overarching most important thing that I took away from it. I didn't like the idea of any substance having a control over me. And again, I had as healthy of a relationship as a 26-year-old, 27-year-old young guy in the UK can have. Never had a dependency on it. Never felt like I needed to use it. I just chose to assist me when I wanted to go and party and have a good time and stuff like that. And I'd never questioned my usage. And getting rid of it made me feel proud, made me feel really proud of myself. I was like, yeah, like I did this thing. Like I'm, forging ahead. I'm trailblazing in this new frontier of sobriety for no reason other than I want to improve myself. So sleep and all of the downstream consistencies that came from that. The social confidence that came through as well. The mental agility and the improvements that I saw with that. The social group changes. And finally, the pride that I felt in myself.
Interesting. Did any body composition changes that you noticed? Or, I mean, you've kind of been in shape, so it might have been, tough to ascertain like what was dictated by what, but.
Yes, I would say for sure. Definitely found gaining muscle more easy. It was during both times that I did it. First, I did 2 6-month stints and then 1,000 days. And the 2 6 months were both during quite aggressive hypertrophy phases. And that was great. I was able to eat more. Even though you binge the next day after you've been on a night out, you're not binging appropriately. It's not, let me go and cook another steak. It's like, let me order another pizza. And then the third time, the big one that I did was when I was in my CrossFit phase. And I've never changed my body composition as quickly as when I started doing CrossFit. My body really responds well to that high intensity, high load thing. So yeah, with all of those, it was great.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what you're describing, and I may be speaking out of turn because I'm not a neuroscientist, but from the research that I have seen and that I've spoken about probably ad nauseum on my channel, neuroinflammation is a huge piece with alcohol, right? There's very solid links published with neuroinflammation and even moderate or even light alcohol consumption. And the things that you're describing, the sleep, the social awareness, the mental acuity, these are directly correlated or seem to be correlated with neuroinflammation. And I mean, that has a direct effect on your performance, and it has a direct impact on, dopamine and your intensity. And if you look at how, dopamine works at a very basic level, I mean, you're constantly comparing your body, your mind is constantly comparing past and present and immediate past and, present. And if things that are intense or difficult are more intense and difficult, and you have more limbic system resistance, because it's just harder to do that because there's more neuroinflammation. Well, think about it. I mean, you're not going to push it as hard. Your subjective score, your subjective rating of perceived exertion is still going to be a 7 or an 8 or a 9, but your absolute is not.
Yes.
Right? So your absolute intensity improved. And when you're starting to look at something like CrossFit, it's a perfect example because that's I typically how I train too. And it's like you need, it's that intensity. And at that high percentage of intensity, the delta between like slacking and the delta between pushing it is so much and so important. Like high intensity compared to just not quite high intensity is huge.
Yes.
So with that, it makes sense that you'd see such a huge, huge difference with that. Now, I mean, when it came down to aerobic performance, did you notice anything specifically with that? Because I've talked to people that have mentioned that specifically. They're like, I don't get winded anymore. I don't particularly have an explanation, but I hear it all the time.
Yeah, that would be a good point. The first 2 times, total bro lifts in the gym, so intensity and cardiovascular endurance wasn't that much of a fuss. The second, the large one for 1,000 days, with that was my noob gains in CrossFit. So everybody is basically vertical with their lines. But basically, even outside of the training thing, you mentioned there about doing difficult things. Building a new habit is really hard. Building a new habit is disgustingly difficult to do. Doing it whilst hungover is essentially inhuman. There is no way, if you've been meditating for 2 weeks, or if you've been going to the gym or eating clean for 2 weeks and you're hungover, guess what? You're not doing it today. And you know that you're not going to do it today. So that was the biggest thing for me, was the ability to compound on consistency, time, money, energy, focus, to dedicate to things that I really cared about.
Yeah, you in essence become a master of your craft versus being distracted, right? It's
correct.
I talk about it even with, I've been with my wife since high school, right? And people, it doesn't sound relevant to alcohol, but in some ways it is because of such, I don't have much of a desire to drink. I don't need to go out and attract a mate. You know, I've got one. Like I'm not worried about it. You know, our social dynamic comes as a result of what fits in with the family and who clicks with us on a moral compass level. And our connections are deep. Circle is small, but connections are really deep. And it's allowed me to be a master of my craft. I'm not spending time doing things, artificially inflating relationships that otherwise wouldn't be meaningful to me, right? And how many relationships did I develop at a time when I was drinking that really weren't actually people I wanted to be around? You know, like you mentioned, it's just no malice, nothing negative towards them, but are these people that are going to enrich how I feel about life? And are these people that I really want to bring into my circle? Perhaps not. Are they people that I care about? Absolutely. Like I care about all people that come into my circle, but are they people that really want to surround myself with? And as a result, it's amazing how much more of your just literal time you get back. You know, when you're able to emphasize like the importance of those close relationships better.
Well, you realize how little you have in common with some of the people you were hanging around with. And that's not a comment on, you know, us, we are not the same and I am in this position and they're in that. It's like, no, like you guys just don't have the same energy, but alcohol flattens the energy. So you guys have a lot in common because you're both 8 drinks deep. And other than that, you don't. And, you know, in the harsh light of day, think about it, man. Like so many people when you're young, especially in the UK, when you're like 21, 22, 23, you don't have friends, you have drinking partners. You have people that you just go out and drink with. And you go, well, do you ever speak to them during the week about anything that isn't to do with the next night or the last night? No. Okay. You have nothing in common. So that was a big realization for me. And here's one thing as well that it made me realize, which is a lot of the events that I was attending, a lot of the events that I was running as a young guy in my 20s, I always wondered why I felt a bit disjointed, remembering that I've ran about 1,000 club nights and met 1 million people running my own events. But I always felt disjointed when I went downstairs and I would go into one of the parties that we had on, you know, DJ, big club, blah, blah, blah. And it's because I didn't have much to talk to people about. I realized that I didn't have anything really to talk about in a club that was like that because I was optimizing for the kind of experience that I wasn't built for. Now, if it had been a live music thing that was just chill in the background or we were at a cocktail bar or whatever, that would have been more my sort of vibe. So what I needed to do is I needed to drink to be able to get myself onto a level where I could resonate with that experience, which for some people, they might not need to. So, you know, you've got people that go and rave sober all the time. That wasn't me. And the events were not aligned so much with where my like primary interests lay as I got older. So I needed to drink more in order to be able to enjoy them, or else I wouldn't go out because my friend group went out to those sorts of events. And the only way I could do it was if I was drunk.
Well, it's like you're denaturing this fundamental sort of law of reciprocity that we have with people too. It's like if I go and I feel like I'm getting something from a relationship with you at a deep level that is not superseded by alcohol, then there's this level of satisfaction that I get out of this in our, you know, very natural, inherent selfish ways, right? You're probably getting the same if we're connecting on a sober level. Are we truly getting that satisfaction of reciprocity if we're both operating out of this masqueraded state? I don't think we are. I mean, I could be entirely wrong. I don't know. I'm just V-shred. But at the end of the day, I think there's something there. I think that it's like you're putting a mask on, you know, and it's like, are you and I connecting, Chris? Or is this, you know, as my wife would say, she always says my initials, Thomas Andrew DeLauer, I'm being Tad when I'm like my alter ego, you know, or are you hanging out with Tad right now? You know,
interesting.
It's, so it's funny because it brings me back to you talking about your drinking partners. It's like, man, it's almost like you have an alter ego. It's like, hey, like in my drinking state, like you are my buddy because it's only this deep.
Yep.
But in our conscious sober state, it's a lot deeper. And those are the meaningful connections that we, I think, strive for as human beings. We're always looking for that connection. And maybe we fake ourselves into thinking that we're getting that connection with alcohol. And it's just been a giant fake through evolution.
I think so. I really wish that more people would be able to realize how great it is to filter out all of the relationships in your life that don't actually serve you. And this isn't me saying like that you are somehow better or more deserving than the people that you currently hang around with. It's that if you had fewer friends and your friends were better for you, you would go out and find more good friends that are better for you. But at the moment, these holes can often be plugged by people who maybe you don't have that much in common, apart from the fact you get drunk together.
What about people that drink because they feel like they feel they're someone else when they drink? That can be a very difficult situation for someone that says, in order for me to change, I need to be able to look at myself differently. But when I don't drink, I don't like who I am. That's a very difficult situation that, coming from, I grew up in Sonoma, right? So it was like, everyone drinks. It's like Sonoma, Napa, wine country, right? And I was like, this was constant. It was like people just felt like they needed to drink to be themselves. And when they weren't drinking, literally throughout the day, it's almost like they became so functional. They just didn't feel they were who they were supposed to be. That can be a very difficult thing. I don't have an answer for that, but I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if most of the people that are listening would say, I don't like the person I am when I don't drink. There's a lot more people that say, I don't like the person I am when I do drink. They become jealous, they become aggressive, they become insecure, they become whatever, but it's all papered over. And God, everyone's got that friend, right? That as soon as they cross a particular threshold, like Tad comes out or whatever, like the equivalent of Tad. If you're someone who feels like you need to drink to be worthy, accepted, loved, confident, if you are at your best when you drink, you have got some serious problems and you are not going to make them any better by drinking more, right? Like if the best that you show up to the world is when you're drunk, come on. Like it's so obvious. It's staring you in the face that you need to do some more self-work here. Like, do you really want that to be the best that you've got to offer the world? Drunk you. When are you at your peak flow, highest contribution, everything is aligned and the astral realm and the physical realm are together? Oh, it's when I'm 8 drinks deep. Nah, come on.
I think it happens a lot with people when they're 1 or 2 drinks deep. They become almost more looser. They see like this is something, they're not when they're 3 sheets to the wind, but when they're saying this is functional for me.
Got you. That's interesting.
You've got the people that even come home and they have to have a drink at 5 because it's like the rest of their life just feels terrible until they have that drink.
Well, dude, I mean, people have got, there are all manner of different ways that life can iterate. Some people can have pretty difficult lives, and of all of the things that they could do to make that better, would both me and you try and prescribe that they go into a high intensity workout? Yeah, probably. But, maybe these people do need a support system to help them get through it. And me telling them to just rip the Band-Aid off and stop drinking may be a little bit difficult. But I do know that the sense of pride that you will have if you can be as confident, competent, fulfilled, balanced, calm as you feel like you are when you drink. Without that, not only do you now not need to use alcohol and all of the terrible health destruction that occurs downstream from that, but bigger than that, you have the story that you can tell yourself that you are the kind of person that has been able to do this without assistance.
No, I think that's very fair. And being able to have someone remove that element of their life first, that is the ticket to being able to do the inner work. You cannot do the inner work with that in the equation.
Correct.
It just does not work. And if you literally think of it as this neuroinflammation as a static, I always describe it as a static. You've got this static, like, fuzzy static. It's like a fog, right? And you can't neurotransmitters, everything can't function. You can't cross those bridges because there's so much fog. It's like you're afraid to cross this bridge because the fog is there. When the fog figuratively lifts, you can actually do the inner work. You're not going to try to sit there and meditate when you're drunk. I don't think you're going to get much benefit out of it. But removing that equation, or from that equation, that's going to put you in that spot to actually do that work. And metabolically, I always encourage people, metabolically, the science is there too. I mean, because some people need that sort of physical piece of it. They need to say like, well, what's going to happen to me physically? I mean, the data on visceral fat, the data on, hepatotoxicity, the liver load, just being able to actually metabolize fats, metabolize fuels better because everything's not taking a back seat to acetaldehyde, to the alcohol. That's all there too. And we've done plenty of content surrounding that. But anyway, man, I want to wrap this up, but where can everyone find you?
Chris Williamson on YouTube, Modern Wisdom on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, et cetera, et cetera.
Right on. Thanks, my man.